So, here's a hot take. Some of the best storytelling in video games is not found in cutscenes or even the main story. It's in the moments most people skip. The side quests, the little conversations no one stops to listen to, the details hidden away in plain sight. I really like Path of Exile, right? And I have to admit, the first time and most consecutive times I've played it, I've skipped every dialogue and everything story related. Which is a shame because 90% of the time I follow every game's narrative, even if it's filler. And that made me think, why me and, well, probably most of the player base completely overlooked that part of the game? But also, what role do narratives play in video games and when do they matter most? On the scholarly side of things, there is more interest in how video games narratives work, the agency aspect of them, the types of narratives. Instead of this ontological review, I would like to talk about what makes us follow stories in games and where their importance lies. But to get there, we first need to start with Path of Exile.
That is bullshit blazing. Still my heart is blazing. If the word kill me, I don't need a new one under you. Soon you will know. We already know the smell of the game.
Well, this whole thing started when I was playing Path of Exile 2, progressing through the campaign while looking at for any lore elements I can find. That made me pause for a second and realize that I've never done that for Path of Exile 1. Well, why is that? The thing about Path of Exile 1 is it doesn't even try to make you care about the story. For example, allow me to play my favorite cutscene from Path of Exile 1. Now, let me show you my least favorite cutscene from Path of Exile 1. Yep, exactly. That is the only cutscene. The rest is simply dialogue that gets skipped instantly, which is, well, understandable. The game itself is very overwhelming. My initial playthrough consisted of my friend explaining the game through the whole campaign and me trying to keep up with him and then asking him a question about something he just explained. Anything I saw during the playthrough was nothing more than a small moment of, oh, that's pretty cool. Anyway, as for every playthrough after that, I was already within the average PoE player mentality, which is simply being fast and efficient. The faster I can get through the campaign, the faster I get to the end game, the faster I can farm money, invest in my build, etc. Path of Exile 2, though, has improved a lot in many aspects regarding the story. It made me realize how much I have been missing out on, but also made me ask myself more about narratives and video games as a whole. Personally, I try to always pay attention to the stories and lore in video games. It simply completes the game for me. It's something I can do without most of the time. Of course, I was aware that many people don't feel the same, so that leads to the question, why? When does it matter? And what makes it important? I tried to do a little survey to see what other people think, and I confirmed one of my initial thoughts. The more the game is based on the story, the more people are likely to follow it. To put it in perspective, the top games with narrative importance would be something like Detroit Become Human, for example, when you can't play without following the story. And the lower end, something like Path of Exile, I guess, where you can spend thousands of hours without knowing what really is going on. The very bottom would be something like Balatro that simply doesn't have a story, as far as I know, haven't played it. Or it's even hard to implement, but this is not the type of game we are talking about in this case. Overall, it just makes sense, but I'm not satisfied with a simple answer like this. What about the gray area in between those types of games? What's the determining factor there? Most people evidently care about the beginning. If a story doesn't catch your attention at the start, then that's that. You spend the rest of your time just skipping dialogue and focusing on the gameplay. Immediately, gacha games come to mind. They have a very specific formula to their narratives. The story often functions as a tool to introduce a character that people will pull for, of course, and make them likable or interesting enough to be profitable. The result is often prolonged, dull stories filled with unnecessary scenes and tons of dialogue with no action or big development for a while. Of course, that doesn't apply to every gacha game or even to a single one all the time, but it does stand out a lot. Especially in the beginning, which, as we've established, makes players lose interest. The thing is, with gacha games as an example, if you manage to get through all the prolonged moments without action, you come to understand that sometimes they slowly build up into something that you can fully appreciate exactly because you've seen everything that build up to it. I really want to emphasize that something as small and negligible as following a story for just one more quest can end up changing the way you experience the game. I've often been surprised by the little details that I barely missed, which end up being very memorable. In Wuthering Waves, you're expected to farm a lot of resources to level up your characters. To do so, you kill a lot of these bosses scattered around the map until you get what you need, simple as that. One day I was farming as one does, getting my 240 energy points of dopamine and eventually come upon this quest. As you progress, you learn more about this boss that you've been mercilessly killing over and over again. Not once did I stop to wonder why it was called Morning Aches, whatever. If I didn't follow the story quest, I would never know either. And guess what? Its lore is not even on the boss's official wiki page. The only thing I found recapping it is a single Reddit post. So let me fill you in. There were once two exes, a couple that lived in harmony, with everything around them, unlike most Tacit discords. Their cries were compared to beautiful songs and locals would look up to them with affection. Unfortunately, one of the exes died, presumably due to another Tacit discord. The other one was left crying out in excruciating pain, trying to get the locals to help them save its beloved, but nothing could be done. It became extremely aggressive and territorial after that. Its cries of pain led to it being named the Morning Aches. In the quest, we learned that a huge storm was being caused by the Axe expending its own energy to try and resuscitate its dead partner. It was not only creating a deadly storm by that, but also slowly killing itself. Eventually we managed to make the two Axes communicate again, and the deceased one convinces the other one to finally let go and stop harming itself. Essentially, the monster we farmed daily for resources was desperately trying to revive its partner by killing itself. Something I'm reminded of every time I fight it again. What I'm trying to say is, a story should be more than a justification for the gameplay. It gives the game depth and you're completely missing out on it if you ignore it. Sometimes it might not be as interesting, sometimes it might not be worth your time, of course, but in the long run that makes you appreciate the good ones even more. You develop a taste, a better understanding of a skill by witnessing all of it, not just the good parts. So what about Path of Exile? Maybe I could tell you how cool the lore is, or how much I like dark fantasy, which it's a great example of, or okay, look, there are already videos about the lore, and honestly shout out to anyone that's made one. I'm most likely gonna make a different video completely dedicated on an in-depth analysis of it, but what I really want to emphasize here is how beautiful Path of Exile's world building is, because that's where the story really shines. Even though you play as the main character, there's so many others that take the spotlight, even if it's for just a moment. You as the player are the classic hero that saves everyone and does the unthinkable, but you'll also experience a lot as a spectator. seeing how entire civilizations develop, how different factions work, what their values are, and not through direct exposition, but through small details that are scattered everywhere. With every character, with every area, background, item description, you can see a piece of history. You can clearly see how anything you pass by in the game has been shaped by the history of Rayclast in one way or another. In the end, it never feels like the story of the exile that became Godslayer. What it really is a story about corruption, how it affects the people of Rayclast, how history repeats itself, and how people stand up in the face of tragedy. To give you an example, in Act 2 of Path of Exile 2, throughout your quest, you come by these ancient ruins. You see this boss called Itzarian. Now imagine this as a regular player just going through the game as fast as you can. You kill the boss, which is not too hard. You get the item you came from and you move on. It's just a small side quest. But just stop for a moment.
Left a child to die. He holds a new loyalty now.
I was mortal then. I was weak.
Then why did you never come look for me after your ascension?
They told me you had died.
I did die. After 30 years living among the Farad'n, it was a harsh life filled with pain. And I hated you every moment of it.
Can you ever forgive my mistake?
No! Save your breath for when my king arrives and lets the seed feast upon your flesh.
This is a prime example of how dark and twisted the world of Path of Exile really is. These are just some random NPCs you come by for a moment in the story that are barely even relevant to the bigger plot that's ongoing right now. But they have hundreds of years of lore behind them that has ended in the most brutal ways. The water goddess, the mother of Itzarian, lays behind the locked door in agony, unable to die, as her only son, now just a monster plagued by bitterness, bangs on the door, reproaching his mother. How long have they been standing there like this? Who knows? They were both once human. The water goddess ascended to godhood through the fate of her people. Now she's completely forgotten, her people are long gone. She's just suffering in her old tomb, not able to die, only hearing what's become of her son, begging for her attention. He, on the other hand, gone insane and turned to this through the influence of the corruption, is only held together by his hate for his mother that abandoned him. Her, the goddess of water, and him, a monster that uses flames. Once a family, now just complete opposites, united only in their suffering. The only thing you can do for them is let them die.
I ask you, mortal, to use that one element that may finally end me. My opposite. Fire. It must be done. Death. Thank you.
Now, imagine this is something you passed in the blink of an eye and never came to understand or appreciate. This really demonstrates how brutal the world of Rayclast really is, and it's just a single story throughout so many others that are similar, that have happened in the past, and that you as a player witnessed the final outcome of, in a way. I think the world building in Path of Exile is simply beautiful. It really is comparable to something on the level of Dark Souls and Elden Ring. I would love to talk about it more in depth, but I will save that for another time. So let's summarize. The biggest reasons players lose interest in the story are two. Either they weren't won over by it at the start of the game, or the game itself doesn't have much interest in its own story. Or, well, both. I think it's also important to mention that storytelling is not simply dialogue. It can revolve around anything from design to gameplay mechanics. Ideally, it should complement the gameplay, but it should also be a part of it. Even though it's understandable with how busy we are these days and how many games are produced, it still pains me to see how both players and developers lose interest in storytelling. Consequently, all the incredible scenes and stories that do eventually come up are completely lost to the mass audience and just reinforce the cycle, as they end up not contributing to the game either by bringing more attention or profit. Maybe if people didn't have to do pointless fetch quests, they would have more interest in the character that gives them once they come up later in the story. Maybe if there was more emphasis on dialogue and cutscenes in games like Path of Exile 1, it would bring more people's attention to the lore and they would take more time to explore the world that the game was built around. Maybe, well, what I'm trying to say is that if we could all put in a little more effort to invest into the story as a developer and explore it as a player, maybe we will find something really memorable and impactful, something that will change the way you experience the game. So do yourself a favor, next time you're going to skip a dialogue, just read one more line. Next time you want to skip a cutscene, just watch one more moment. Maybe you'll find more than what you were expecting and come to appreciate storytelling in video games just a little bit more.